So today we have a simple one. I'm going to try to not ramble your ear off and get this done fairly quickly. I drive old cars, so I'm not really privy to this, but apparently a lot of cars now, you just carry a key fob, and it starts on its own, it locks when you walk away from it. So Kayleena designed this really cool watch key case that has a spot for a couple bills in case I don't know if people even pay tolls anymore, but in case you need to pay tolls or do whatever. And it attaches to a bottle hook or whatever you want to attach it to. So you can kind of just have it in a bag or attached to your hip or in your pocket. When you go to your car, you can do your thing, and it just looks kind of nice. So what we're going to do is we're going to make this today. We're going to use some nylon lining to kind of add some rigidity to specific places. It's not as simple as it looks, but it is still super easy. And then for hardware, I'm going to use a 1/2-inch D-ring and one of our signature split rings, but you can use either 2 D-rings or a split ring and a D-ring, or you can, use whatever hardware you like that you think will fit nice in here. We're also going to need a rivet, which I didn't put in the pattern because depending on what you use, you're going to have to figure out where to rivet this independently. It's going to have to do with the thickness of your leather, the thickness of your hardware, so you know how we do it. Just making sure that this will work for everybody. So we'll get this traced out, and then we'll start putting it together. So I believe you guys have been asking what this is called. I think it's called Velodon. It's just an adhesive-backed, I don't actually know, I think it's nylon, but it's just an adhesive-backed, like very, very thin fabric. And what we do is we use it in between our pieces of leather. It just adds a little bit of strength. And we're going to use that here because this little tab here is going to be a stress point. So it's nice to have the leather thin, but we want to make sure that it can take the stress of being, carried and swung around and stuff over the long term. An easy way to do that is to just get a little piece of Velodon. We're going to stick it in here, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a 2-inch patch right here. I don't want to add too much because the whole point of this is to kind of mold to your keys and stuff, just to add a little bit more rigidity long term, because I'm almost worried that keys are and key fobs are too circular of a shape and it's going to mold too much, if that makes any sense. You can do it any way you want. You can line the whole thing, you can not line it at all to get it nice and broken in. It's just what I'm going to do. And if you don't have a lot of experience using little, I guess, liner pieces or structural stuff, this is a good project to just give a go because it's not a lot of this stuff. You're not using a ton of this stuff, but you can kind of get the hang of it and see what it does. We are going to have Kayleena design the pattern. We are going to have it on the website. It's going to be like $1 or $2 if you want to make along as well. And I'm going to do this in 2 pieces. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a measurement here. It's 4.5, I believe. So I'm going to go about 4 inches. I don't like to go all the way to the edge because then you can see it, and it's not very pretty compared to a nice burnished leather edge. So remember, just use, if you have a nice cutting board with a grid on it, you can just use that to make all your cuts, and we don't need to be super accurate with this. So this is going to go right there. Now what we want to do is we want to cut a strip that goes from here all the way down, because we're going to rivet this, and we want to make sure that the rivet goes through that piece, because believe it or not, this is very, very strong, almost like regular fabric. And so we just want to make sure that we're getting this all the way down so that it's attached to each other, and it'll hold these D-rings strong for years and years. So I'm going to apply this piece first. We'll get this guy all lined up in there and stuck down. And then, you don't have to be super careful. I mean, if you want to draw out lines and stuff, you can, but you guys know me at this point. I like to eyeball it. Not going to make much of a difference in any way if you're a millimeter off to one side or the other on this piece. And that should be good. So this is a very simple project, but we do have to make sure we do things in order. So the next thing is we obviously can't leave this like this. We have to line this piece, but we do have a pocket. And we have snaps. So what we need to do is we need to line this piece, then install our snap hardware, at least on the side we're putting our pocket on, then install our pocket, and then we can sew everything up. We talk a lot about leather itself, and hide selection is in individual hides, but we don't always talk about is parts of the hide. And I'm admittedly not good at the names of the parts of the hide. I just know you use backs for belts, etc. But when you get a hide in, you'll have some variation in the thickness of the hide. So this is the hide that I cut this piece out from. And I have a thin section right here that will be really nice to line this because we want it to have a lot of flexibility. And now that we have the liner in, we don't really need it to be super strong because this nylon or this backing is going to be a lot of the strength for us. So I have a thinner, more soft part of the hide here that'll be perfect for lining the inside of this piece. So I'm just going to cut out a chunk here. And I think it's important to point out too that on camera this leather looks pretty nice, but we always try to use, for like our samples and our videos, we always try to use leather that would otherwise either go to samples or go to waste because it's got some marks in it that we wouldn't sell on the website. So when you see me cutting out a big chunk like this and you go, well, aren't you wasting leather? In a way I am, yes, but I can't really do much else with this part of the hide. So it's just a nice way to, on camera, be able to have a big enough piece that sort of shows you what it looks like to be working with a piece of leather, but also use up our, essentially what would otherwise be just sample stuff or scrap. So, all that being said, we need to glue up these two pieces, but before we stick them together, because this piece is going to be folded like this all the time, I want to glue it sort of like that, so that it will hold its shape and it won't bend. How should I say this? It won't like wrinkle on the inside once it's fully closed up. So you can avoid that by actually gluing the bend into your piece. And you can use jigs and stuff, but I'm going to show you how to do it just freehand with a piece like this because it's fairly simple. We did our video about failure yesterday. I just pulled one of these. Big old dab of glue right on the front. So sometimes you gotta redo your pieces. Luckily, movie magic, I got a new one cut out, so we'll just glue him up instead. Right, so when we glue this, like I said, we kind of want to glue the shape into it. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to take my pattern, and I'm just going to fold this over. You can do this before you glue it. I just like to glue everything flat first, because if you're using contact cement or use barge, once it's dry, it's not sticky to the touch. So you can put a piece of anything that doesn't have glue on the other side down, and it's not going to stick to it, which is actually really nice. So I'm just going to put a couple rough folds into this piece, just to get it started, kind of, and they're not going to be perfect, but they'll be roughly where we need them to be. You could measure this out if you want to. And then all we have to do is kind of just, we have our snap holes here and our snap holes here. I'm just going to make sure that those roughly line up without sticking this to itself. And you can see, even if it's touching leather, if this doesn't have glue on it, it's not going to stick. So this is the shape that we need. Now what we're going to do is we're going to use our pattern again, put that down, and we're going to go kind of one side at a time. Let me see if I can get this on sideways so you can see it a little bit better. And that's why I kind of have a big piece here, because we want to have enough room that if we put this down kind of sideways, it's still going to cover, we're still going to get full leather coverage. So I'm going to start here first, and I'm going to kind of roll this on. Because remember we want that to stick too. So I guess I should start at the bottom here. There we go. And we'll get that stuck on. So we're going to go there first, and then grab my new favorite tool. Well, not new, but you guys know I've been really into this roller the last few months. Stick that down. Then we're going to take our fold, and we're going to kind of go like that. Now this is a little tricky, because we want to keep this part separate. So what you can do is, You can just put your pattern there and protect it while we stick down this piece. And make sure you get this little bend in between too, but you don't want to flatten it. I mean, you can, it's not going to do much, but I like to kind of let it keep its shape. Now we're folding this part back, and we're going to fold this up and around like this. And now, like I said, there are plenty, you can make really cool jigs and stuff, but if you don't have one, I'm just basically showing you how to do it without. This is going to work just fine. You can see we're all stuck down now. You just want to really make sure that you have one of these rollers or a good bone folder or something to make sure we're getting stuck everywhere that we need to be stuck. Because sometimes, oh, and I did it. You see how you have an air pocket there? This side's good, but so what we're going to have to do is rip this apart. And because that came apart too easily, I'm going to add a little bit more glue. Anytime I unstick something, if you're lucky enough that you can unstick it, I always will add a little more glue just to make sure we're getting a good bond the second time around. And this happens all the time. I think after you guys were so kind and really showed us a bunch of love in last week's video, we weren't really sure, we've never made a video like that before, but I want to try to show you guys more of the process of how, even when we're filming a video, when we've designed the pattern, we've made the practice pieces, you know, some pieces you just kind of gotta go with the flow, make adjustments. There's nothing wrong with that. It's all part of the process. So we'll give this another 5 minutes to dry, and then we should be able to fold this over, being very careful to make sure that everything is perfectly stuck like our first side was. With little details like these curves and stuff, I like to just use hole punches and strap-in punches to get the right thing, because it's just not super easy or not super fun to try to cut that by hand. So we're just going to use a punch to get the correct radius, and then we're going to use a strap-in punch to get that little guy rounded out. And now all we have left is to just connect the dots basically with straight cuts. So you can see by gluing it this way, it's already holding its shape. And what that's going to do is it's just going to make it a lot more comfortable to fold this over. You can see we have no wrinkles on the inside when we fold it. Will it take a little time to break in while you're opening it? Yes, but you're never going to like fully just lay this flat probably. So I usually err on the side of going with bending it in a way that it's going to be mostly used. If you just do this, you can also just make this out of a single piece if you want, so you don't have to worry about gluing anything at all. But the next step before we install the pocket is we have to at least install the, let's see, what side are these? The female side of our snaps. So on the pattern, for the pocket on the inside, you have a trim allowance. So you want to make sure on this one specifically, this is 2 inches, so that's the goal here. If we make it any further into the piece, then your pocket is going to overlap where it folds. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use the lines on my bench to line up my bottom seam and make a little mark with my awl at 2 inches. Make sure you can see that. And that's just going to tell me where to glue to. And then we will glue both our main body and we'll glue our pocket. And you don't need a whole ton of glue here, just a little bit. And I say that because you're going to see us put a lot of glue on the other piece, and that's because you have to remember we have about almost a ½ inch of trim allowance, because I wanted to make sure that no matter what thickness leather you use, you're going to be able to use that piece, as with all of our patterns pretty much. I wouldn't go super thick on this, but you know, if you want to do something burly out of 5 or 6 ounce leather, this will still work for you. So our glue has to account for both the trim allowance, and we want to make sure that we're actually making contact from this glue to the glue on the body of the piece. And remember, you can always take a bone folder after everything's dry and sewn in, and you can unstick. That's actually one of my favorite parts. But, so we have a very healthy allowance of glue. Now, once this is dry, we can stick everything together and we should be good to go to stitch. To bridge this gap, I'm going to stop my stitch line here right before this curve, and then I'm going to pick it up right here and kind of finish this off. And then what we can do is we can take the straight edge and the scratch awl and just connect our lines, and that's how we can get one even stitch line across this whole piece. Now, a lot of people have written to us, commented, whatever, asking how, when you use stitching chisels to punch all the way through, how do you get a slanted stitch on both sides? You'll notice I'm stitching from the, I'm going to punch from the inside of this piece. I'm doing that because the outside has no pockets or anything, while the inside does have a pocket. Now, we don't want to punch from the inside, the outside, and if something happens and we get a stitch like right here and it splits the seam, we don't want that to happen. So, as I've said many times, I always punch from the side that has the most going on. To get a slanted stitch line on both sides, what I do is I punch from one side and then I sew from the other. And you'll see how that works out, because if you punch from one side and you sew from that side, the back side can look a little weird, it can kind of just look straight stitched. But if you punch from one side and you stitch from the other side, you generally get a nice slanted stacked stitch on both sides of your piece. Alright, so we have our 2 holes punched here, but as I said before in the pattern, there's no hole marked for where our tabs are going to be. Now the reason for that is you have choices here. You can put a single or you can put a double. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put a key ring first, then I'm going to put a single 1/2 inch D-ring. What that's going to do is it's going to allow me to attach this to a bag or whatever. Then I can use a jump ring or a D-ring or something smaller to attach my key fob. Well, I don't have a key fob, but you can use something smaller to attach it to the D-ring, and that way it won't fall off. So I'm going to put both of these in, and this can be a little tricky, so take your time. And we're going to make sure it's fairly centered. And we're just going to go in here, and boom. There we go. So now we know exactly where our rivet needs to go. So why do we have all 3 of these machines? Well, it's very simple. Now, these are presses and they have little dies. And you can buy tons of different dies, which is great for a small-time crafter because you can get one machine that does a billion different things. However, when you're like us, sometimes we'll have a stack of 80 things to put all the hardware on, right? So we have 3. The reason we have 3 is because we keep them sort of permanently set up, or we'll set them up to do every single thing we need to do on a single piece in one go. And that saves a ton of time because we're not doing all of one thing, then switching it out, then doing all of another thing, switching it out, going through a third time and adding a rivet. We have, I forget, this is the female end of a snap, this is the male end of a snap, and this is riveting. Rivets, this stays pretty much all the time. You can just take it out. It's really no big deal to switch. The dies for the snaps are more size dependent. So we're set up right now to use, I think these are line 20, but you know me, I'm not a huge stickler for exactly what the names of everything are. We'll have a link in the description for these exact snaps on Weaver's website. They're really wonderful, they're solid brass, and I like them because they're very simple. So this is where so say I was making a batch of these. I would obviously have to get this one done first for the pocket, but let's say there was no pocket. So I got everything stitched up, and now I would come over here, and instead of doing a bunch of this, a bunch of the female sides, then putting them all aside, switching the die out. The switching the die out isn't the hard part. We've just found that you spend a lot more time if you have to go through everything 3 times. When this setup, I'll show you. So you would go here first. Then I go to my male side. I set that one. And we have all of our hardware over here laid out as well. So we have snaps, rivets, etc. So it's all right here within arm's reach. And then we're going to go get that one set. Now here's where, I don't want to say the magic happens, but instead of resetting everything, all I have to do is pop my rivet in there, pop my hardware, fold this over, and put my cap on, and my rivet die is already set up, and I can gently set that rivet in. And now, within a matter of seconds, the entire piece is done. So you come over to this station once, you do 1, 2, 3, and then your piece is done. Instead of doing, with one machine, doing all of one thing, resetting, all of the other thing, resetting. See what I'm saying? If you're just an individual crafter, if you're in your bedroom, you only need one of these. I'm not trying to sell you extra crap you don't need. But having a full bank of them, if you're doing production work, it's not even that big of an expense. These things are like $300. Weaver sent us one and I bought 2 more the next week. To put it into perspective, we are sponsored by them, but we do also buy stuff from them. That's how nice it is to have multiples. And I want to push that. I really want to harp on that, because it's not about being superfluous. It's not about buying machines that you don't necessarily need but you think will be cool to have. If you find enjoyment out of it, go for it. I get it. But if you're trying to be efficient, once you get it to a particular point, you're going to get a job that you will save $600 in labor if you have this whole setup, because this saves us hours, right? And then after that job, everything's paid for itself, and now forever, you'll have this setup that is very, very efficient. So it's just a little insight from me. This is the only tool that we have multiple of like this, because it's really the only one that makes sense, just because you can set up a full assembly line. And once you get to even 30 to 50 pieces, this is going to save you 45 minutes to an hour getting all the hardware installed on those 30 to 50 pieces, which, depending on how you value your time, for me, as soon as it saves me 10 hours, I considered these machines paid off. And that was 2 years ago. And so now it saves us, it just continually, it's like compounding interest. It continually saves us labor hours, which in turn saves our customers money. So let's go back. I think we're pretty much done. Let's go back and get this loaded up. And here we go. So this is Kayleena's, and this is mine, and I like it because you can kind of see the different approaches, right? So if we open Kayleena's up, she already has her fob, and I don't own a key fob, so I don't really have a use for this, but I wanted to show you guys how to use it because I know most people have newer cars. So you can see with hers, she went with just a single D-ring and then used a keychain to hold her keys underneath it. But then you can also just kind of use this as a keychain attachment if you want to grab yourself a bottle hook, link in description, and you can put more keys on the bottom of it. So mine, I have a spare key ring. If I were to use this is how I set it up. I have a spare key ring out here for like my house keys and all that stuff. And then this is hanging off of another key ring, and then I have my D-ring here, which I can hang my keys from. I have a couple, we just put some cash in here to show you. This is just some folded up cash. If it's perfect, it's not big enough for cards, but that's not really the idea of the whole design. And overall, it's just a really sleek, clean look. And you can see where we glued in that bend, how nicely, this is totally unbroken in, brand new veg tan. How nicely it lays. You have plenty of room in there for keys. It's not smushing it together. Same with this one. And this one actually doesn't have, Kayleena made it without any liner at all. Or not liner, Velodon. There it is. There's no Velodon or anything in this. It's just a bit thicker leather. And they both work really nice. And honestly, this one's going to age really nicely because it's going to break in a little bit quicker than this one, given that it doesn't have that Velodon on the inside. But since I used a firmer leather, I went with the lining, and to just have a little bit of a more rigid feel, because you can do it in many different styles. So that's going to be it. Thank you guys so much for watching. Remember, the pattern is going to be, I think, $1.50 or $2 in the description. It's a very simple pattern, but you have a lot of options to make a lot of different styles of this wallet. We were thinking, neither of us carve, but it would be so nice to see like a fully tooled version or something like that. So if you do pick up the pattern and you make it, tag us on Instagram at Corter Leather. We always love to see what you guys make with our patterns. We love to see all the different versions, and we love to share them with everybody. It's really been one of the most fun parts of all of this. But But until next week, thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.